I just want to speak about this Joe Rogan situation. Joe Rogan has been in the news a lot lately because of his content, because of the content on his podcast regarding COVID. If you know, I'm a big fan of the Joe Rogan show. I've been a big fan of the show for years, and what initially attracted me to the Joe Rogan show is the fact that I recognized him from the show. You know, Joe Rogan used to actually host a television show where people would eat eat nasty stuff like worms and bugs and all of this different stuff, and it was like a competition show to see who can eat the nastiest stuff. And, you know, I remember him from that show. I forgot the name of it, but it was a long time ago. And I remember Joe Rogan from being in the Dave Chappelle sketches. You know, he would be in the background of a lot of Dave Chappelle shows sketches. So when I found out he had a podcast in like 2009, I became a fan of it because he would speak about he would have guests on who were very interesting. He would have these physicists, he would have these philosophers, he would have these people who spoke about all of these various intellectual topics. You know, like the Joe Rogan show was a perfect show because it had so many diverse topics. You know, there would be people from the scientific community on, there would be people from the anthropology and archaeology community. He would have people that were involved in space, cosmologists and stuff like that. And you would actually learn a lot from his podcast, you know. And that's the reason why I fell in love with it, because he always had these high-level intellectuals on his show, people who were very famous in these scientific fields. So, you know, but I've always understood that Joe Rogan, the whole purpose, one of the underlying underpinning concepts of his show is alternative information. You know, like for example, Joe Rogan had a show with this guy who came up with the simulation hypothesis, and he basically said that reality is not real. Life itself is not real. Life is a simulation. You know, we may be actually living in a computer simulation, you know. And you know, this guy and Joe Rogan was speaking about it in a serious way, you know. And you know, it's a show that gives you alternative information. You know, the Joe Rogan show is a show for somebody who, for me, I looked at it as a show for people who want intellectual content delivered in an entertaining way, and alternative information about things that you normally don't hear, the other side of the headlines, you know. And I always thought it was cool. So, but when it comes to this COVID thing, everybody's on Joe Rogan's back because they feel like since he's the #1 podcast in the world, the biggest podcast in the world, he has a responsibility to keep his listeners safe by giving them the right information. And a lot of people out there are saying that Joe Rogan keeps challenging, you know, the advice that the scientists are giving about COVID, and he's causing people to be skeptical about vaccines and stuff like that. Me, personally, I feel like this. I think it's weird that everybody is so interested in politics now. I think that it's weird that everybody's into vaccines now. I remember when I was in 6th grade, I had to take a vaccine. It was called a booster shot in order to get into school. They wouldn't allow you to transition from elementary school to junior high to middle school unless you took this particular vaccine. And nobody complained about it at that time. There was no movement against taking that particular vaccine. Parents weren't upset about it. As a matter of fact, parents wanted their kids to get that particular vaccine. I mean, the place where they sent us to get that vaccine was jam-packed, thousands and thousands of people, and everybody was happy to get their kid that particular shot. And over time, throughout my life, whenever various diseases came, like SARS, Ebola, and stuff like that, and when it came to my experience in traveling to different places, I've never seen people become upset over vaccines or people develop these conspiracy theories about vaccines. People, I mean, from my experience, I've seen people travel to different countries and they were excited to get these different shots, tetanus shots and malaria shots and all of this stuff. And nobody at that particular point in time cared. Nobody was skeptical. Nobody was distrusting of the doctors. People were excited to take these vaccines and these shots because they thought it was a wonderful thing and a normal thing. I know, and only within the last couple of years have I noticed people are actually a little bit more resistant to, you know, what the establishment is telling them to do. You know, I mean, Americans have always been anti-establishment. The whole founding of America, the creation of America, came from anti-establishment sentiments. You know, so I think it's just in our DNA to question things and not accept things for what they appear to be. But at the same time, things are so crazy. It's to the point now where people are literally challenging everything. You know, it's like people are refusing to believe things now. You know, it's like people have their own version of reality. You know, it's like we all aren't living in the same reality anymore. Everybody basically has their own individual reality, you know, and you can pick which reality that you want to live in based on what you think is true and, you know, what path you want to follow. And that's something that I've noticed within the last couple of years. I would say when Trump came into office, this phenomena happened where people, I mean, because people have always distrusted the news. I mean, that's nothing new. But as far as people distrusting scientists and people just distrusting general information and just people not believing anything at all, I think that's a fairly new phenomenon. I think that's something that recently happened with the Trump administration. You know, I think that people are more, you know, I call it intellectual schizophrenia, you know. And I call it intellectual schizophrenia because it's like, people's perception of reality has become schizophrenic, you know, and you know, it's like it's like, you know, like for example, I met a guy one day when I was in Walmart buying some shampoo, and he was telling me, he said, "Hey, don't buy that shampoo." I thought he was joking, and then he said, "Hey, you don't really want to buy that shampoo, man. Buy this shampoo right here. This one is fine." And I said, "Why shouldn't I buy this Head and Shoulders?" He said, "Head and Shoulders is working alongside the government to infiltrate people's thoughts." And I said, "What?" And he said, "Don't use Head and Shoulders because it's not really shampoo. That Head and Shoulders has a bunch of microchips in it, and once you know, put it in your hair, it's going to lock into your brain, and it's going to read your thoughts and send it to a government computer." And that happened about 2 years ago. And when that happened, it made me realize, hey, we're living in a totally different era now in America. Things are no longer the same. You know, people have always distrusted things. People have always questioned things. People have always went against the status quo. But what we're living in now is something more than that. It's deeper than that. It's like people are disagreeing with reality. And they're just creating their own reality that they feel comfortable in. I think it's great that people are having these dialogues about vaccines and things like that, but at the same time, I think it's sad and I think it's unfortunate that people who don't have any medical experience, people who aren't really doctors, are, you know, telling people what they should and shouldn't do, you know. Hey, do what you want to do. At the end of the day, we're all Americans. We're all able to do what we want to do, but at the same time, why would you trust somebody that read a bunch of stuff on the internet? You know what I mean? My whole thing is this. If these people, these conspiracy theorist people, really think that the COVID thing is a part of some government plan to hurt people or kill people or whatever they think the intentions were, if they think that the pandemic was created, if the powers that be have that much power to where they can do things like that, why wouldn't these powers that be have the same level of control over the internet? Why is it that the information that you read on the internet is true, but reality is completely fabricated? You know what I mean? So wouldn't the powers that be have the power to, you know, have the power to control the internet? You know, wouldn't they be able to control the information that flows on the internet? You know, if they're able to create pandemics and do all of this global, all this global control stuff. So, I don't know, man. I'm not mad at Joe Rogan. I feel like everybody's entitled to their own opinion. I do think that you have a certain level of social responsibility when you make it to, this famous this level of fame that Joe Rogan is at. He has the #1 podcast in the world, so I do think he has a responsibility to, just don't. I just look at it like this: as long as Joe Rogan isn't coming out there and saying, "Hey, don't trust doctors, don't trust science," as long as he's not doing that, everything's cool. If he's just simply trying to offer an alternative way of thinking, or just offering extra information about the COVID vaccine and things like that, I think that's cool. But at the same time, I think it's wrong if he's actually going out there and saying, "Hey, don't take the vaccine because it's going to kill you," blah, blah, blah. Because I don't think that Joe Rogan is, medically competent enough to even make such a claim like that. I think Joe Rogan is just like everybody else. I think he reads a bunch of stuff on the internet and he comes to his own conclusions. But, yeah. But like I said, the worst thing to me is the fact that Americans can no longer agree on what reality is. It's like, back in the days, nobody cared about politics. Politics was a boring thing. If you tried to spark up a conversation about politics, people weren't even interested. Now, politics has become so entrenched into our daily lives that people actually relate to politics as their identity. So it's like, if you disagree with somebody about a political thing, it's like you disagree with them with their identity. You know what I mean? And people are taking it that way. They're not taking a political disagreement as a simple disagreement. They're taking it as you disagreeing with their identity, with who they are, with their makeup. And I think it's sad, and I hope that things don't continue to get worse because, if you have a civilization can't exist if people don't believe in the same things. You have to have a basic level of culture. You have to have a basic level of honor, trust, and belief in order for a civilization to continue to function. Because if everybody is off in their own world and everybody has their own version of what's true and what's reality, then things aren't going to work. I mean, who's to say that further down the line, parents are going to start withdrawing their kids from school because they think that the school is a part of some government conspiracy to kill their kids? I mean, these are serious things. Peace.